Alright, more encounter support, which also includes the new Stride Grade 3 order promo for Harri and Nightrose. So let's begin. And I'm going to be ignoring everything else besides the encounter support. So we started with Die Kaiser support with Dimensional Robo Die Crawler, which is a grade 2 and taking power on the skill is auto when discarded from hand during your turn while your Vanguard's Dimensional Robo energy charge 2. This is very helpful, especially since Dimensional Robo does use more energy. Also, possibly you could even do the energy 7 early game to draw a card. And then the second skill, Auto Soul. When your Vanguard is stood by card ability while you have at least 2 Vanguards that are Dimensional Robo, aka through Dayusha's skill while it's in D-Legion, bind this card to give it 1 drive check into the end turn. This is because Dayusha got errata, so when it gets the restanding Vanguard skill, drive becomes 0. And with this, it gives back to drive +1. In addition, if your Vanguard is at D-Legion state, that usually just means have 2 Vanguards anyway, your whole front row of Dimensional Robo gets plus 5k power. And yes, since you have 2 Vanguards, that's a total of 10k buff for your Vanguard, since it's 5k power for each one. Overall, it's already nice support, especially just another Dimensional Robo in its arsenal. And it's one of those that you can put to Soul. And now to a Shadow Paladin Blaster support, Judgment Dragon Vega Dial, which just like most of the non-clan encounter support we got, this card becomes Shadow Paladin if your Vanguard is Shadow Paladin, and its main skill is auto when placed on rearguard. When your Vanguard is Blaster, put a card from your hand to Soul to draw a card. And also this card gets plus 5k power in the end turn. Once again, it's another one of those trade-off cards, but what's important is that you put the card from your hand to your Soul so you could cheat out your Cross-Ride skill. But this time it's free even though you're drawing 1 less card, but free is much better. But what makes this even more insane is literally the second skill with the third skill, because the second skill is count rearguard. If this card will be retired by your Vanguard's Blaster's ability, it's counted as 2 retires. With the third skill of auto when retired from rearguard from your Blaster's Vanguard's ability, cost energy boss 3, choose a Blaster Dark rearguard and it gets this skill. Auto rearguard once per turn, when this card attacks, this card can perform drive checks. And then at the end of the battle, retire this unit. Basically, it's an additional skill version of the original grade 2 promo that does exactly the same thing. When retired, it counts as 2 retires and also giving your Blaster Dark the drive check. With the exception is that this one does cost 3 energy, but it's also huge at the same time because it's not restricted on your opponent being grade 3. And also it has the additional skill where you could trade a card from your hand to draw a card, which putting that 1 card in your hand to Soul is just very huge because you could skip the cross ride. It's just another way to do it. So it's literally almost like 2 cards combined into 1 once again. Don't know will this completely replace the original grade 2 promo, but you can always run both side by side, considering that it just gives you more options for you to just do a retire, since sometimes you don't draw into the grade 2 promo even at 4 copies. So just having additional copies is nice. And one more thing that is also very huge is that it's also counted as Shadow Paladin, so you could always use that searcher that is undercover that searches for a Shadow Paladin as well. And now to the Harri Grade 3 Stride promo, the Great Crescent where the moon shines. And just like all of them, they're a grade 3 normal order, and also has this one skill where when it's being discarded for a cost of a stride, you can either make the hard card's counterblast reduced by 1, or the stride unit costs reduced by 1 counterblast, which is definitely helpful for a deck that doesn't really have much countercharge options. And its main skill is that you can also play it from drop, and you play it by having a Harri Crest and you bind this card, and you choose one of the following. Look at the top 7 cards of your deck to choose up to 1 card from one of them and put it to your Soul, and then your Vanguard gets plus 5k power, or choose a card from your Soul and call it to rearguard and it gets plus 5k power. This is just nice just because you could also play this from the drop zone, and considering that you have choice Soul charging, you could technically search for this, especially through the Pale Moon grade 3 searcher that can put a card to your Soul and then just Soul Blast this out right after. And it's overall just additional options for more free pluses, considering that the deck does use quite a bit of counterblast with not much ways of countercharge. And now to the Harri Stride promo, Nightrose's Dancing in the Twilight, which is of course a grade 3 normal order. And no, this is not considered Nightrose, consider that Night, Space, and Rose. It's not Nightrose combined. And just like all the other Stride promos, we also have that skill where when it's used as Stride, the next unit that is either the Heart or the G unit can be reduced by 1 counterblast, with the main skill of being able to play from the drop as well, and you play it by binding it while you have a Nightrose Crest, which is already nice that you can play from the drop, considering that the deck does mill quite a lot and you can always choice mill in this deck. But anyway, to the skill itself, you perform one of the following. You look at the top 7 cards of your deck to choose up to 1 card from them and then put it to the drop. Of course, shuffle your deck and your Vanguard gets 5k power, or choose a card from your drop and call it to rearguard, and that unit gets 5k power in your turn. Basically, it's similar to Harri, except that it's called from drop instead, and free of counterblast as well. Even though Nightrose does have countercharge, I will say sometimes you do use the counterblast a bit fast, so it is nice that you have more ways to call. even though the deck doesn't exactly need that many ways to call, but sometimes you do need Counterblast to call stuff, so it's just nice to have options that you don't need Counterblast to use. And also, once again, this is Stochea here, so you might be able to run some order engines in Nightrose, considering that Nightrose is so flexible. And finally, to the last card that isn't encountered, so forget what I said in the beginning, but it's a new grade 3 boss unit for Nymph or Hermit, which is Pierce Spear Dragon Zelgalgian, which is a grade 3 or 3 power, and the skill is auto. When placed on Vanguard, choose up to one grade 2 or less card from your drop zone and call it to rearguard. If the unit was either a Nymph or a Hermit, reduce the next cost of the auto abilities of that unit by 1 counterblast. If you guys don't remember that little archetype, it was introduced back in set 8 without a boss unit, so now we just have a proper boss unit with a full-on deck for it now. In which the second skill is Auto Vanguard. When you play Wondrous Melodies, aka the order card, search your deck or drop zone for one unit that is either Nymph or Hermit from a card name and call it to rearguard. And of course, if you search your deck, shuffle it. This is of course pretty good to refill your board, as you want to fill up your board of those units, as it's basically an engine for a restand. And speaking of restand, the last skill, Auto Vanguard, once returned at the end of this unit attack, costs either Counterblast 1 or put 2 Wondrous Melodies from your drop zone to the bottom of the deck. So you have to put 2 order cards to the bottom of the deck, stand this unit, and it gets plus 5k power and drive -2 into the end turn. But your opponent's Vanguard is at least grade 3, drive +1 in the end turn. So for the decks wise, it is actually pretty nice that you could either choose a Counterblast or just put 2 copies of the order cards to the bottom of the deck, which is also recycling. But once again, it's another restanding Vanguard that gets an extra drive check as well if your opponent's at grade 3. But it's also nice with the amount of plussing that you can do, because on place it's a +1 and it's also -1 Counterblast on top of it. And it has its own second skill where when you actually play the order card, you get another call, which can set up your board, and then you have one of your other units that will just call one of your other units, which will just make it basically a restanding engine right there, giving you pretty much a 5 attacks. Overall, it's pretty cool, just a little weird that they decided not to introduce this in set 8. And finally, here are some reprints. I would have to say strange over trigger choice, considering that since it's a Christmas theme, I think they should have chose a Christmas theme. Even using an angel would have been nice. But that one Chris Rain reprint is just huge. And finally, here's the LSR for Fennel. And then next week we got Dress Up Sienna, along with Felty Rose as support. I'm definitely excited for Sienna because I do play the deck, especially with the interesting mechanic that it does. And so that's it for these promo reveals for basically a bunch of encounter support. What do you guys think of them? Dimensional Robo and Shadow Paladin support is just nice, especially once again we're just combining abilities once again, but better than the original in a way. At the same time, it does cost extra, but the deck for Shadow Paladin doesn't really use energy overall, so the new grade 3 is actually pretty fine, especially counting as Shadow Paladin, which makes it searchable. And then just for the Stride deck set promos, once again, they're just nice additional support, and also because they do sometimes encounter counterblast issues, it is nice that you do have free of counterblast costs here. And then the Nymph unit is just pretty interesting, even though it does what most of Dragon Empire kind of does already. So it's just overall nice stuff. But other than that, that's it for this, and see you next time.